Hi there, welcome back to your favorite deep dive show on stories contemporary and consequential for India. This week, like I always do, pick two. One national, one international. Both about inaugurations. Donald Trump would take oath as 47th President of the United States of America on Monday. It is already causing foreign policy heebie-jeebies around the globe. Even before he takes charge, a trade war has panned out with every major trading nation building their moats and keeping powder dry for the anticipated Trump salvos. We take a look at the contours of the Trump presidency 2.0. And we would understand what the RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat meant when he said that India achieved true independence with the Pran Pratishtha or consecration of the Ram Temple in Ayodhya last year. He was speaking at the first anniversary of the inauguration. Is he being provocative or outright irresponsible in pushing what is clearly seen as the Hindutva or Sangh narrative? Let's get going.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is.
There is something to the timing of the Israel-Hamas hostage deal. It happened days before Donald Trump enters the White House. According to reports, the deal is similar to one proposed in the month of May last year. The only thing that seems to have changed is the Trump presidency. Trump had promised hell to Hamas if the hostages were not returned. With its leadership decimated, Hezbollah support system crippled, and Iran helpless with Syria developments, Hamas is making a virtue out of necessity. But this is just one of the many ways Trump impacted world events even before he has taken over. Now that his cabinet has also taken shape, let us do some crystal ball gazing on how various aspects of world politics and economy are going to be affected. From threatening to purchase Greenland or annex Panama Canal to calling Canada 51st state of the United States, Trump has done what is called batting out of the crease in cricket parlance. Only that geopolitics is no cricket. As the saying goes, you campaign in poetry but govern in prose. During his stump speeches, Trump was like the war in Europe would end in 24 hours after my inauguration. Now, in a straight admission last week that things are more complex, his national security advisor pick, Mike Waltz, has said that it might take longer. The new deadline is 100 days. Waltz also said two things that should worry President Zelensky of Ukraine. One, that Ukraine should reduce the age of conscription from present 25 to 18 years, thus increasing supply of soldiers. And two, that it is not realistically possible that Russia would be evicted from every inch of the Ukrainian soil. With earlier suggestions from the Trump team that Europe should be willing to pick the tab and on expenses of the Ukrainian war, the message is clear. Ukraine needs to do more or expect less from America for its war. What's coming the way of Ukrainians became clearer with the testimony of Marco Rubio, all set to be the next Secretary of State. There is no way that Russia gets to keep all of Ukraine, he said, which means it can keep some. And there is no way Ukraine can throw out Russia from all the territory that Moscow has come to occupy, he said, which means truce would result in a truncated Ukraine.
I believe, and I think that this echoes with the president. Let me first echo the president's words and what he said in an interview about a year ago. He was asked about the war in Ukraine. He says, I want the dying to stop. I want people to stop dying. I want the killing to stop. So this is an important conflict, and I think it should be the official position of the United States that this war should be brought to an end.
So the die is cast. At a transition event in Washington, D.C., the incoming and outgoing NSAs, Waltz and Jake Sullivan, had a dialogue this week. Couple of things came out of it. There is clarity among America's strategic elites that China is their threat number one. And any other strategy, be it on Greenland in Europe or India in Asia, is essentially a subset of the China strategy. At the same event, Waltz spoke of revving up the Taiwan funding and prioritizing the shifting of supply chains to reduce the China dependency. The idea is to bring manufacturing and connected supply chains back to the US from China. If that is not practical, then to friendly countries in the Western Hemisphere, and then ultimately to partner countries like India. Walz has been the co-chair of India caucus on the Capitol, and Rubio is a China hawk of the kind that he was sanctioned by Beijing in 2020. By making him Secretary of State, Trump is looking Xi Jinping in the eye. As member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Rubio introduced legislation that would block tax credits for electric vehicle batteries produced using Chinese technology, and grilled the FBI Director Chris Wray in a 2023 Senate hearing on Beijing's influence over TikTok. Rubio called TikTok a substantial national security threat for the country of a kind that America hadn't faced in the past. In his confirmation hearing this week, Rubio continued to call China the biggest threat, and that the country had lied, cheated, hacked, and stolen its way to become a superpower at America's expense. You know where the wind is blowing on China, Taiwan, Ukraine, and the wars in general with the new Trump presidency. Canada has unveiled a range of measures to strengthen border security, including increasing personnel and enhancing technology. On Wednesday, the government announced the deployment of Black Hawk helicopters and additional drones to enhance surveillance along the shared border. This is in response to Trump's threat of slapping tariffs on energy and climate change. While the Biden administration had almost a messianic zeal appointing a climate czar in John Kerry, Trump is clear it is none of his business what happens to the penguins in Antarctica. As recently as this week, he has said that offshore windmills make whales go crazy in the oceans, and that he is not going to let a single windmill farm come up during his presidency. Tilting at the windmills becomes literal, not just quixotic.
You can talk about windmills. They litter our country. They're littered all over our country, like dropping paper, like dropping garbage. They don't work without subsidy. You don't want energy that needs subsidy. Energy is a good business. You don't need subsidy.
But the basic argument is economic. Wind is an expensive energy and can't be sustained without subsidies. So Trump wants them out. Trump is broadly opposed to Biden's clean energy policies and has vowed to lift regulations related to US oil and gas production. He cares two hoots about electric vehicles, despite Elon Musk having put in $250 million in his campaign. And that explains his energy secretary pick in Chris Wright. He was CEO of a fracking company that specializes in extracting last ounce of oil and gas from the ground using an expensive high water consumption technology called fracking. Wright has vowed to unleash American energy, which means that under Trump administration, the United States would step on the paddle on oil, gas, and nuclear energy production. The biggest bugbear of Trump era is what is called an impending global trade war. Saber rattling is already happening. Only a matter of time before the swords are out of the scabbard. On Wednesday, even a lame duck, otherwise meowing Trudeau, growled that everything was on the table. It would be an eye for an eye, he said. That Canada could slap reverse tariffs on American imports. Imagine. A Trudeau who has scurried to the Mar-a-Lago residence twice to hobnob truce with Trump is also growling. That explains the kind of pressure leaders would face around the world from their domestic constituency. Even Biden administration, giving in to the mood of the nation, disallowed the takeover of the US Steel Corporation by the Japanese Nippon Steel this week. So she is the way to go in these times. Trump announced again this week setting up of what he called a new agency to collect tariffs from foreign sources. As of now, the US Customs collect tariffs which are paid by importers, not foreign countries. Those American importers often pass the added costs of the tariffs on to consumers, driving up the prices. If he follows up on his campaign promise of a flat 20% tariff on Canada and Mexico, United States' second and third major trade partners after China, on day one, and even higher rates on China, then there are going to be consequences. Let us just look at these three. United States import bill for its top three trading nations, China, Mexico, and Canada, is upwards of US $1.2 trillion, which means at 20% tariff, Americans could be paying US $240 billion more for its consumption of goods. When Biden is leaving the White House, Americans are dying of wildfires. By the time Trump vacates the Oval Office in 2029, Americans could be dying of inflation. Not a smart thing to do. Again, like in the case of the Ukraine war, so on tariffs, some of Trump's economic advisors are already suggesting that those threats might not come true. That 20% tariff is a maximalist position aimed at bringing countries to the negotiating table. Art of the deal as per Trump. If that be the case, expect lesser disruptions on tariff battlefront. That brings us to what all this means for India. First, there would be difficult times ahead on trade negotiations. We would need to buy more American goods or face a hit back. Remember, Trump considers India a tariff king. This time, we might not just get away by lowering duty on Harley-Davidsons, but that could also be offset with some buoyancy in exports. The weakening rupee against a strengthening dollar leads to higher earnings for Indian exporters. Second, Trump's climate skepticism and pro-hydrocarbons energy stance would ease pressure on our own green energy transition. India might also benefit from deflationary global energy prices as America under Trump would increase its oil and gas supplies. Third, since subtlety is not a virtue in Trump universe, our diplomacy might be under increasing pressure to be more openly pro-American, if not loudly anti-China. Fourth, the kind of deep state machinations via the George Soros ecosystem we saw, be it on farmers' protests or the Hindenburg hit job, would stop. Trump would be transactional on American interests, but not a regime changer outside. Fifth, and my last point on India's national security. Tulsi Gabbard has traditionally been pro-India, taking on the Biden administration as recently as the Bangladesh crisis. She would be heading the national intelligence setup. Kash Patel, another pro-India voice, is going to be the FBI chief. NSA Waltz has been India caucus co-chair. Rubio piloted a bill in the Senate last summer to strengthen US-India partnership even further. Between Waltz and Rubio, we have a combination which sees Pakistan as the best friend of China and their nemesis in Afghanistan. The goose of Pakistan is cooked. In sum, reasonably good times ahead for the India-United States partnership.